my project on Lyme disease, and I'm going to start off with a little video and hope that it runs. This is part of a documentary from 2007.
There's another tab open. You have 2 tabs running.
Okay. Someone know how to stop this? I know, I pressed pause and it's not pausing.
Because there's 2 of them.
There's 2 of them?
Yes. If you hit escape and then go to the other tab, you have to close the other tab.
See the tabs,
The
there's 2.
second one is that one.
Just get rid of
We
it.
go to that one. Okay, so we can pause that one. Thank you. Let's turn that. Are we turning that?
How does
You have to do it. I don't know how to do anything, so.
And the speakers.
Okay. Okay.
In the old continent, I was gonna die.
He kept saying to us, I have no idea what this is.
We have, I think, a horrible epidemic. It's the next tsunami.
Are you still ballet?
She just went downhill very fast.
How much we have a gifted athlete to there's times like it's hard to put a shirt on.
It just doesn't seem possible that this poppy seed size thing is gonna make you bedridden, possibly for the rest of your life.
There's Lyme disease everywhere.
It's more prevalent than AIDS.
How many more people are going to suffer before the truth comes out?
As citizens, we ought to be astonished and alarmed.
The major medical journals have published that chronic Lyme disease is not real and it's a psychosomatic condition.
I kept getting poo-pooed by the doctors.
We don't think there's anything wrong with you. There is nothing wrong.
There's no medicine for someone like you.
They don't have any evidence of ever having had Lyme disease once.
She shouldn't have had to die.
We know about Lyme disease. It's something that we have a good handle on. Oh, that's nonsense. Such a waste. Insurance companies trying to get rid of doctors who cost them a lot of money. What he'll do will be to cite that there's no such thing as chronic Lyme disease. They don't want to pay.
It is difficult for doctors who want to stand up and help these patients.
Dr. Jim said his license is suspended.
There's a message that's going to be sent to the other doctors that it's not safe to take a Lyme patient on and treat them.
I had to fight for what I got. I'm glad to be here.
By the time you're so disabled, you're in a panic state. How do you know how to fix it? How do you know what to do?
Do you want to first start the slideshow? Oh, it's pretty easy. And let's go next. That's oh no. It's slow. Sorry. Oh, okay. Okay. So what is Lyme disease? Historical background is the bacteria was discovered in 1981 by Willy Burgdorfer. all getting mysterious, strange symptoms. They didn't know why, and it was spreading. So she went to the state health department, and they had an investigation on it, and then they discovered it in 1981. It's a bacterial infection. The bacteria is Borrelia burgdorferi, and that's burgdorferi is named after Willie Burgdorfer, who discovered it. There's 300 strains of Lyme disease bacteria worldwide, and there's 100 strains in the United States. It's a spirochete, which means it's shaped like a corkscrew, so it can drill into anything in your body. It's cousins to syphilis. It's really similar to that, because syphilis is also a corkscrew, and it's a multi-systemic disease like Lyme. It's spread by ticks, fleas, mosquitoes, and congenitally. That's something that's not very well known, because people just think it's spread by the deer tick, but that's not true. It's found in every single continent except Antarctica, and it's getting higher and higher. Last year, in 2014, there are over 500,000 new cases in just 1 year, so that adds up to millions living it with it right now. It's the fastest growing vector-borne infectious disease in the United States, and it's multi-systemic, meaning it can affect any system of your body, like your hormones, your endocrine system, your neurological system, and anything. Congenital Lyme disease is known to cause birth defects, developmental delays, things like autism, failure to thrive, or miscarriage. Okay. Early symptoms and myths, acute Lyme. Acute Lyme is what most people think of when they think of Lyme disease, but it's actually the minority of the people are like this. Some of the early symptoms are flu-like symptoms, like fatigue, muscle pain, joint pain, headache, back pain, stiff neck, and the most common, not common, but the most well-known thing is the rash that looks like a bullseye that people think of. Except that most people, less than 50% of people get a bullseye rash, and if they do get a rash, these are some of the pictures of things that can look like that isn't a bullseye that people miss. It's known as like an EM rash. Some of the myths of Lyme disease is people say Lyme's disease, and that's just not saying it right. It's just Lyme. It's not, doesn't have an S. It's spread by more than deer ticks because of mosquitoes, some spiders. Most people don't get the classic bullseye rash. Ticks can transmit infections quickly. It doesn't take 24 to 36 hours or 48, which lots of things online, and people say that it takes 48 hours to have a tick on you because it takes a certain amount of time for the bacteria in their stomach to get up to their mouth. But they found ticks that have the bacteria already in their mouth, so as soon as they bite, you can get infected, and you don't really know which tick is going to infect you faster. The early symptoms can be missed, so that's one way that Lyme disease is misdiagnosed and missed a lot, because if people don't have these symptoms, they could just go right to the later stage symptoms and then get misdiagnosed. The ELISA test is the test that mainstream, like if you went to go get tested for Lyme disease today, they would use that. It tests for antibodies against the Lyme spirochete, but it's 50 to 60% inaccurate, and that's because there's 300 strains of Borrelia burgdorferi, but the test, the ELISA test, is only based off of one strain. So if you don't have one strain in certain bands, it'll come back negative. And because of that, many Lyme patients have a negative Lyme test, and they think that they don't have it when they actually do, and they don't know that the tests are inaccurate. So here's a picture of just a bunch of different ticks, and their size is in relation to a dime. And Lyme bacteria may be dormant or asymptomatic in the early stages, so you can skip all these things. And then when you start showing symptoms of later stage things, it's a lot harder to treat. A few common general symptoms of chronic Lyme. What is chronic Lyme? Chronic Lyme is really, really controversial. It's like a really political thing. So there's two really different sides to it. But chronic Lyme is Lyme that becomes like a chronic, long-term health problem. It's not just an acute thing that's treated in 2 weeks. And this is minus some of those neurological symptoms. And since it can affect any part of your body, you can have like hundreds of symptoms for just each organ. But light and sound sensitivity, muscle and bone pain, migraines and headaches, neuralgia and neuropathy, which is like stabbing, burning pains, numbness, and tingling, GI disorders, eye problems, a change in weight, chest pain, and tachycardia. Symptoms come and go, so you don't just have a couple symptoms. You'll have maybe one day you have bone pain, and the next day it switches to something else, and it kind of cycles around. So people end up going to a stomach doctor, an eye doctor, a neurologist because the symptoms keep changing and they don't know what the cause is. And they also wax and wane. And mostly for women, they worsen with hormones, so you can have flares of Lyme disease with hormones. It causes poor blood circulation, insomnia, vertigo, ringing in ears, weakness, low immunity, rib pain, change in appetite, underactive thyroid, hypothyroidism. Allodynia is extreme sensitivity to light touch. People can have pain with like the air conditioning vents, like hitting them, like air and skin, or just like your hair touching you. Severe fatigue, painful or swollen lymph nodes. People will have problems in cold or hot temperatures, not being able to handle it. Bell's palsy, part of your face becomes paralyzed. Pressure in your spine. A metallic taste, like if you eat food, certain foods or water, you taste like metal, tastes like aluminum. And a sense of temperature dysregulation. And that's just a picture. That's okay. Oh, that's okay. That's just a picture of me at the top right in like 2013. Yeah. Lyme disease is known as the great imitator. That's because it's very hard to diagnose because it can affect any part of your body. So no 2 people have the same symptoms. It mimics over 350 different diseases and can cause virtually any symptom. Symptoms are very non-specific because there's so many of them. People are often not aware of being bit by ticks, so they don't think that they could have it. Doctors don't know a lot about Lyme disease, most of them, or that's like a really controversial part of it. The testing is inaccurate, so people will get tested and come back negative and then think that they're okay. It's often misdiagnosed with other diseases or disorders for years, so people will think they have like Crohn's disease, for example, and get treated for that, and then 5 years later they figure out they have Lyme disease. People, all tests, they'll get lots of blood work and things will come back normal, and even though they have all these symptoms and they feel really bad, that's really because the testing isn't good and because the doctors don't order the right blood tests, or it could just, things can come back normal, and Lyme is like known for that. People are generally unaware of the symptoms caused by Lyme disease, so they're not aware of all these things, so they wouldn't think about it. Patients may feel like they're not taken seriously because after doctors keep looking and looking and they don't find anything wrong, they think that you don't have anything and that you're causing your own problems. It's commonly misdiagnosed as fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, multiple sclerosis, ALS, lupus, chronic pain, different types of arthritis, Crohn's disease, gastroparesis, thyroid disorders, stress, irritable bowel syndrome, mental illnesses, POTS, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, and it's like a dysregulation of your autonomic nervous system where if you're sitting and you go to a standing position really fast, your body doesn't adjust, so your blood pressure drops and your heart rate compensates and goes really high, so people get dizzy and they pass out from that. And of course, there's over 350, so there's a lot more things. Lyme in the brain and nervous system. Lyme disease, the bacteria crosses the blood-brain barrier, and once it gets into the blood-brain barrier, it makes it a lot harder to treat. It's hard for medications to get there. So it causes a lot of neurological things, especially in late stage, like chronic headaches, personality changes, irritability, depression, anxiety, hallucinations of colors and seeing random things, trouble focusing, stuttering, seizures, movement disorders, ataxia, memory loss, declining school performance, loss of motor skills, random bursts of crying and like emotional things, mood swings, trouble reading, getting lost in familiar places, having trouble putting thoughts into words, spacing out, slow processing, confusion, tremors, inflammation of your brain, which is encephalitis, brain lesions, they often mimic multiple sclerosis, forgetting how to perform simple tasks, speaking backwards, losing your train of thought, dystonia, which is when your limbs get twisted and stuck in positions, the feeling of crawling, like bugs crawling over your skin is a symptom, paranoia, thoughts of violence and like kind of almost psychosis, weakness, paralysis, and numbness. And that's a picture of me May 15th when I was just having a bunch of seizures in a row and not coming out of it, and I was just kind of in a daze for a couple hours. All of those neurological things can be misdiagnosed as depression, ADD, ADHD, dystonia, dementia, Alzheimer's, multiple sclerosis, ALS, bipolar disorder, dyslexia, epilepsy, panic attacks. It's all in your head, which means like there's nothing wrong with you. Transverse myelitis is inflammation of your spinal cord, OCD, migraines, and schizophrenia. And they did a bunch of studies at Yale. They took, they have like brains of dementia patients and Alzheimer patients after they died, and they tested the brains for Borrelia burgdorferi, and in 70% of the Alzheimer, dementia, and ALS patients, they found Lyme disease in their brain. This is a picture of like a page I follow on Facebook. It has a bunch of Lyme posters, and it's misdiagnosed, told it was all in their head, and it's a bunch of people that have Lyme disease. That's how brain lesions can be misdiagnosed as multiple sclerosis. That's one of my friends who has inflammation of her spinal cord from Lyme disease, and that's a picture of me getting a brain SPECT a couple weeks ago. Controversy of chronic Lyme disease is really, really controversial. There's two really distinct sides, and they like won't budge for anything. There's the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, Infectious Disease Society of America, and infectious disease doctors that say chronic Lyme is not real. They say that 2 to 3 weeks of the antibiotics cures Lyme disease. They say it's hard to get and easy to treat. They say it does not cause long-term problems. And if you're not feeling better, which means in 2 to 3 weeks of antibiotics, if you're not feeling better, no matter how long you have it, the symptoms are psychological, or they're the aches and pains of daily living, and that's like a quote from a doctor. They say there's no evidence of long-term antibiotics helping, and Lyme disease doesn't create those symptoms, which are all the ones I stated. And then there's the other side, which believe in chronic Lyme disease. ILADS, International Lyme and Associated Disease Society, and Lyme literate doctors, which are known as LLMDs. They say chronic Lyme disease is a real complicated disease, and they call it a multisystemic infectious disease syndrome. They use a lab in California. It's called IGeneX because it has a higher sensitivity for detecting different bands in Lyme disease, and you can get a bunch of other tests. But insurance doesn't cover that because it's not like a really well-known lab. So to get a full blood panel, it costs $1,500 out of pocket. They say chronic Lyme needs specialized treatment. Long-term antibiotics work. Lyme persists past 4 weeks of antibiotics. And that's kind of easy to say, to prove, because you can just do different tests and find the DNA of Lyme in people that have been treating it for years. It causes a wide array of symptoms, CDC's treatment guidelines deny treatment because they say that 2 to 3 weeks cures Lyme disease. So the doctors, like infectious disease mainstream doctors, will only treat for 2 to 3 weeks, and if you're not better after that, then oh well. Patients are denied insurance because the insurance companies, they never want to pay for anything, obviously. They're always trying to get around it. So one way they do that is if someone wants long-term antibiotics and they submit it to the insurance company, they will cite on their paper that no, the CDC says that 2 to 3 weeks cures Lyme disease. And sometimes they will target the doctors that are treating these patients because so they don't have to pay. And then the doctors can get their license taken away for that. So that's a big problem that's happened to Lyme doctors who have had their licenses suspended. That's a picture of me in August. I had like a stomach biopsy. And that's a picture in December with the surgery. Oh, and then I have a video on the top left, sorry. Which is, it's from the sequel of the video I showed before. It's gonna take a long time.
If you think about how many people are probably affected, it's scary. How many people could actually be
This was
very,
just
very sick.
like last year.
6 times the number of HIV cases, 50% higher than the number of breast cancer cases. It's a huge problem. I thought I would either die or live with this pain forever. It was almost like you have your life taken away from you.
This had tremendous effect on my wife and on my children, and this family is no more.
We didn't really know what we were getting into. You just feel like you're in the water and it's up to your head.
It's known as Lyme disease. Thousands suffer from it.
La maladie de Lyme, elle touche entre 10 000 personnes en France chaque année.
Die Zahl gefährlicher Borreliose-Erkrankungen ist deutlich gestiegen.
The man has died, but yet again, authorities refuse to acknowledge the disease exists.
The CDC does not want chronic Lyme disease to have a foothold as a legitimate medical entity in the United States or elsewhere in the world.
There's one official who says, this is a war and we need to start shooting back.
I lost everything. 100% of Canadian Lyme doctors have now been shut down. The story of Lyme disease has been that the public health response has blown in the direction of the big money.
Members of the CDC have patents. They've arrogantly tried to deny it.
The last vaccine that they had out actually harmed patients. It harmed people who weren't sick.
More and more evidence has come out that chronic Lyme exists.
Is Lyme disease sexually transmitted? Is Lyme disease the next epidemic after AIDS? These sins committed are so great and so ugly and so large that it can't be negotiated out. So the lie is too big to confess at this point.
We need to look at people with Lyme disease as indicators for the problems in our environment and this disconnection we have. You know your body better than anyone, so don't let someone tell you that you're wrong.
We may be patients, but we are not patient anymore. We've had enough. And I'm asking you not to give up. I'm asking you to keep going.
So that kind of shows a lot of the controversial factors of it. Okay, this is, these are some pictures. They have an IDSA, Infectious Disease Society of America, because they're the ones that have the guidelines that are really restrictive. They have a protest every year in Washington, D.C., so people go down in front of the IDSA main building, and they have protests for better treatment guidelines. different times pulsing antibiotics. That means if you're diagnosed, they're not just going to give you one prescription and say take this for a certain amount of time. You go on and off and you switch to different things, so you're always changing it depending on how you're doing. A Lyme diet is really important. It's one thing that people are really pushing with Lyme disease. It's pretty restrictive. It's no sugar, which you can have like fruit, like natural sugars, but added sugars. No sugar, dairy, gluten, yeast, or alcohol. That's because the sugar feeds the bacteria, and also a lot of sugar just causes inflammation in general. And the same thing with gluten, especially because gluten is a lot more processed, like wheat, than it was years ago. So that's one thing that you can't have. Yeast, because if you're taking antibiotics, that can cause yeast problems, and you don't want to add more yeast. Or alcohol. A lot of alcohol has gluten in it, and just is known to make things worse. And when you stick to that, like I haven't had those things for a year, basically a year. If you mess up and you have something that has sugar in it or gluten, you're so used to not having it that it can make you really sick and feel gross. Lyme is like not just treating with medicine, it's really a full body approach. So there's supplements people take, like omega-3s and turmeric helps with inflammation. Bunch of supplements, vitamins, probiotics are important. Immune support, IVIG. Lyme suppresses your immune system. So you can have intravenous immunoglobulin, which is pictured here. It's from like blood donors. And it's basically putting their immune system into you. Medication to help symptom management, physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, pain management, just whatever you can do to help. Alternative medicine, there's always naturopathic things, lots of different things that you can do. Herbal protocols and treatment takes months to years. That's a picture of a Viceland intramuscular shot. They're like this big, and you have to go really, really slow because it tears like the muscle fibers, so you're supposed to take 3 minutes just to put in a shot. That's a picture of a PICC line for like IV antibiotics, which they use mostly for really late stage and neurological cases because it can pass the blood-brain barrier. That's a picture of me and my brother at physical therapy a couple years ago. Okay, these are some pictures of when I got a portacath last year, which you see a lot with cancer patients. That's a picture of when I got, you can still see like my scar right here, because I still have it, but to administer, and that's what it is, that little circle thing goes like here, and then it feeds up in your neck, and then it goes to your heart, and then you access it with a needle to flush it and things. So that's one form of treatment you can do. Why chronic Lyme is so hard to treat, and it's not just Lyme, and that's really like literal, saying it's not just Lyme, because it causes a lot of things. So Lyme is like, I call it like umbrella term because many things are underneath it. There's 3 forms of bacteria: spirochete, cyst, and biofilm. Spirochete is the corkscrew. Cyst is when you take antibiotics, it forms into a little ball, a cyst, and it hides so it can evade your immune system. And the biofilm is like this yucky stuff, I guess, that forms around the bacteria also to evade the immune system. The bacteria can hide from your system and go dormant. Things that take Lyme out of dormancy, out of like a remissive state, is like stress and flu and cold and simple things. It can be triggered by vaccines. Gardasil is one that's known to really flare Lyme patients. It's resistant to medication. You need certain medication to bust the cyst when it gets into cystic form. There's co-infections, Bartonella, BABESIA, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, Ehrlichia, and other parasites. Those are all infections that can and often come with Lyme disease in one tick. And the damage is not easily reversible because it's been building up for a long time. And a lot of the complications of Lyme have to be addressed first, otherwise it won't go away. causes inflammatory reactions causing inflammatory disorders, so it can cause like Crohn's disease and just widespread inflammation. It causes autoimmune diseases like lupus. PANDAS is pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorder associated with streptococcal infections, and that's when you have strep and your immune system kind of goes crazy and it attacks the basal ganglia of your brain. It causes a lot of neurological things, and that's common in Lyme patients. Or autoimmune encephalitis, when your body attacks your brain and causes your brain to be inflamed. Heavy metal poisoning, you don't get that from a tick itself, but lots of Lyme patients find out that they have heavy metal poisoning with it, which is another complication. Common ones are mercury, lead, arsenic poisoning, so those cause problems. Multiple chemical sensitivity, people will start getting rashes and just basic things like things they've been using for years that can trigger seizures in people. Candida and mold, so yeast and mold. People can have a high amount of yeast in their blood, and they can have mold and like fungal infections with it. They have problems with their gut bacteria because they'll have low levels of the good bacteria, and they can have other intestinal parasites and bad things in their stomach. And if your stomach isn't working right, then you can't process anything that you're given, so that's important. People develop new allergies. They'll be allergic to foods that they were never allergic to before. Red meat is one that is common. Just random allergies. Nutrient deficiencies. So even if you're eating well and you're following the Lyme diet protocol, if your stomach can absorb the nutrients, then you can be deficient in like magnesium and zinc, and then you're having malabsorption. And just having nutrient deficiencies can really, they can cause a lot of symptoms like with your nerves and your muscles. It triggers pain syndrome. Some are known as central pain syndrome and reflex sympathetic dystrophy, which is caused by a small injury usually, or a surgery can trigger that. And you have immune system suppression, so if you can't get your immune system to work right, no matter what you do to try to help yourself, you're not going to get anywhere. And that's a picture from May 15th, and then that's some other ones from a couple years ago. Here are some bacterial co-infections of Lyme disease. There's a bunch of them, like Mycoplasma, BABESIA. BABESIA is similar to malaria. It's really like malaria, and it attacks your white blood cells. It can cause problems breathing and other things. Bartonella is cat scratch fever, also known because you can get it from a cat scratch, and you can get all of these. Well, you're probably not going to get all of them, but you can get multiple with Lyme disease, and there's also a bunch of viral infections that aren't even up here that you can get, like Mycoplasma pneumonia, which is a type of pneumonia. This is, I know you can't see it, the words probably, but it shows the amount of symptoms for Bartonella, and which is also multisystemic and can cause serious neurological symptoms. And they're really identical and similar to Lyme disease, so they kind of overlap a lot. These are real pictures, believe it or not, of Bartonella marks. It's known to cause red lines that people mistake as stretch marks, but that's really, unlike the Lyme rash that most people don't get the bullseye, lots of people have these red lines all over them, like right here or on their legs from Bartonella. Treatment is not an easy process, and the biggest thing with this is known as the Herxheimer reaction, known as a Herx, and that basically is also called a die-off reaction, when the bacteria starts to die, and instead of just dying and you being okay, it releases toxins into your body, and your body starts to be full of all these toxins. And depending on where the toxins are, it causes a lot of problems. And that's why when people are treated, they get worse for a while because of these Herx reactions. One of like the most easy to explain is in November when I was in school with a wheelchair for a while. That was because of neurotoxins being released in my brain, and it problems with your cerebellum, so causes gait disturbance and problems walking, and that was a Herx reaction. And they usually last for a couple days to a couple weeks. And they can get really bad. It depends on how bad you have Lyme disease and where it is. Because a couple times, like the worst times, it would give you problems so bad that I would be unresponsive for a couple days and just like lay on the floor in the bathroom and not be able to move. And that's why it gets worse before it gets better, and that's what a lot of people don't know. And the goal is remission, because when bacteria hides in cysts, it's really hard to target it. Relapses can occur when the bacteria comes out of the cysts from times of stress. Antibiotics and other medications have side effects, so it's hard to find medications that your body can handle with side effects not being too bad. One of the worst side effects that I've experienced was in December, when one of the medications caused gallstones. So those are pictures of in December when I had my gallbladder taken out and like all the bandages and stuff from that. Lyme takes advantage of weakness, injury, virus, and cold. So if you have Lyme disease and you get a cold, it makes it a lot worse and a lot more out of proportion than the usual population, and it makes everything hard to recover from. Stress, overexertion, and hormones can trigger flares of symptoms. There's not one specific medication that works for everyone. Since Lyme is very controversial, doctors do not agree on how to diagnose and treat Lyme and other tick-borne diseases, creating confusion and controversy for people that go to seek treatment. So a lot of people can't get treated because they say it doesn't exist, and they'll just send them to like the psychiatry and stuff. Lyme literate medical doctors are difficult to get a hold of. They don't post things like, you can find websites for other doctors, but you can't really find much about Lyme literate ones because they kind of want to stay out of like the public eye, I guess. So the insurance companies and people aren't targeting against them, and basically, yeah. And prevention, lastly, don't disregard tick bites, because you might not get sick now, but in 10 years when you have all these strange symptoms and you can't figure it out, then it'll be really hard to find out what it is. Educate yourself, understand that it's very controversial, and you can find a million things on the CDC website that say it takes 2 weeks to cure it, but I mean, it's just not true. So be skeptical of what you read on the internet. If you think you may have Lyme or other tick-borne diseases, early diagnosis and treatment is critical, but since people have to pay out of pocket to get treatment, a lot of people can't afford that because it costs like $1,000 per visit plus medication. So if you can't afford it, then people don't really have anywhere to go. And just basic things, wearing bug spray, wearing like light colored pants if you go out hiking, and boots so you can see things on you, and showering after you're outside, spraying your yard with tick like repellent. There's certain people that can come and spray your lawn, and treating your pets for Lyme disease. And lastly, awareness for Lyme disease. May was Lyme Month, and every year, past like 8 years, I just heard about it last year, at WestCon, they have a tick-borne disease prevention program, and they have all these famous, really well-known Lyme doctors, like the ones that are in that movie. They come and they talk. That's like Dr. Richard Horowitz, who wrote a really good Lyme book, and it's the Lyme Connection in Ridgefield is the group that puts together this big like Lyme fair,